Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and video show which brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience from hundreds, no, thousands of individuals from around the world. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe so you won't miss a new episode. I'm your host, Frits Bussemaker, and today I'm delighted and privileged to have a conversation with Carlos Hernandez. Carlos, welcome to the program.
Hi, Fritz. How are you? Thank you for the invitation.
Hey, Carlos,
Happy
allow
to
me
be
to
here.
introduce you to our guests who are either watching or listening to this podcast. You are currently the CEO at the Pellas Development Group, based out of Costa Rica,
Correct?
international real estate professional, and you created some of the most unique and awarded concepts in luxury hotels, which we'll talk about. And you've done that in
hmm
Mexico, Bahamas, USA, Central America, including the very famous Atlas Resort and casinos in Bahamas. You have an education at US Kellogg School of Management, and now you're here to talk about how you got there. So, Carlos, we met in Costa Rica because that's where you're based at the
Correct.
moment.
That's correct.
And so when I was there, you told a lot of stories about the place where we were. And it actually confirms what I also read in your bio. You call yourself a storyteller.
Correct.
Is that
Correct.
true? So what does that
That
mean?
is true.
What kind of stories do you tell people?
I think it took me several years of experience and several years of until you eventually have the maturity to figure out exactly who you are and you feel comfortable in your own skin. And that's probably the same story with every young, ambitious professional out there as they're started their life journey. And it takes a while until you actually figure out exactly who you are. And I ended up figuring out that I was a storyteller in the sense that for the things I do, which is inspire people to believe in visions where nothing exists yet. And we'll go in a minute to that. But basically, over the years, I became an expert in developing destinations and resorts in locations where none exist. And it requires vision, but it also requires an ability to tell a story
Yeah,
because
yeah.
other human beings are easily inspired if you tell them what you think in the way of a story. And after a while, I figured out, oh, I'm very good at this. I'm actually good at taking a mission, which could be very very business-like. Let's build a destination resort here in this location, and hopefully with the hope of generating returns and jobs and economic impact. But once you go to the point where there's actually nothing there, and it's hard to the naked eye to figure out why it is that we're developing there in this remote area in the north of Costa Rica, in a frontier that was until now largely ignored. I quickly learned that I'm a storyteller. I can tell
Okay.
stories that help me inspire others to see what I'm seeing, and hopefully that creates an impulse to action, right?
Okay.
So
Now,
that's why I thought I'm a
great.
storyteller.
You are a you are a storyteller today. But let's go back a little bit to on the beginning. Um, how did you end up in real estate? Was that always something you desired, or was that more varied background?
Well, no, I was a very typical young kid coming out of high school, like millions of them, not knowing really what to do with my life. Like I had no idea what was really my vocation. I had no idea. I had very little knowledge about potential paths or professional paths or anything. I didn't have a strong vocations like medicine or law, uh, but I did have some hints of what was going to be later. Since I was very very little, my favorite pastime was imagining worlds with Lego toys
Okay.
and building stuff like cities. I mean, imaginary cities, imaginary neighborhood blocks with my Lego. I was also an imaginary explorer. And I had no idea I was going to have to do a lot with my life later on, but I always felt like I was an explorer. I used to play with that. And I always loved architecture. But I was never sure that I wanted to be an architect. It's just I love design and the built environment. And I always thought that some of the most admirable people were the people that came up with the buildings I like in my own city, Mexico City, where I was born, which is a cradle of great architecture, like Legorreta or Barragán. So there's a tradition of all the way down to even the colonial palaces of downtown Mexico City. So I was exposed to that aesthetic aspect since early. So I knew that, but I knew little more. I had no idea. And but since I like the built environment and I like designs and I like the built environment when it's well done, when I finished high school, I admire very much a friend of my dad because he was a builder, and I have no idea what the name of the profession was, but he was a real estate developer and a civil engineer by profession. But most importantly, of all the friends of my dad, he was the most explorer. He was a hunter and an explorer, and he did an expedition to Alaska. So I grew up knowing this person, and without him really knowing he was a mentor or a figure to me. My dad was a lawyer, and I didn't want to be a lawyer. That was but his friend was an explorer, hunter, builder. So I said, I'm going to ask him what to do with my life. So I went to his house. I said, like, he was with his friends. They were having fun. I say, hey, how are you, Toño? Can I just ask you a question? I'm a 18-year-old kid. I'm having doubts. I don't know if I should study architecture or civil engineer. And he laughed with his friends. I said, oh my God, you want to be an architect? Like those are artists. Those are hippies. Yeah. You might as well become a hippie. So I had no idea what he meant by that, but I said, okay, it's clear. I'm going to be a civil engineer. Not going to be an architect.
Yeah.
And I went to study civil engineer, and I did well, but I quickly realized I didn't want to be a civil engineer. I didn't want to be a builder. Nevertheless, I finished the career, and I was hired by a large construction company and engineering company, because that's where you go if you're a civil engineer in Mexico.
Yes.
And by pure chance, very young, I mean, working right off college, this company ended up winning the construction management contracts to a new hotel in the north of Mexico in Cabo. And the distinct characteristic of this project was that the developer was not a Mexican company or individual, was a North American developer doing it for a Mexican family. And it was going to become a very innovative project in the sense that it was going to change how luxury hospitality was perceived in Mexico. So this was a project that will change forever the landscape of the potential of luxury hospitality in a country that Mexico before that, you will go for vacation, but you will never imagine that you will pay in excess of $1,000 a night to stay in Mexico. This project was Ventanas al Paraíso, a Rosewood hotel that even today is an iconic trophy asset, and it changed the landscape of luxury in Cabo. Everybody that is in this industry and knows this industry knows very well that Ventanas was really a trendsetter. And I was just very young, and I got involved in this team. I was thrown into that by accident, right? Like, okay, you young kid, go to that project as well. And I got exposed to great mentors like Hal Tanish, which was the developer of this hotel at the time. And in an indirect way, I was still part of the construction team. I was not a developer, but I started to realize this world of hospitality, beautifully designed environments. And the reason we were in that team made the company win a second very important contract, the one in Atlantis in Bahamas, which is also an iconic hotel, very large, and one of the most innovative hotels at the time in terms of a theme, in terms of this fantastic world that emerges from the ocean with ruins of an an imaginary civilization lost to the
great
Atlantic.
water park. I've been there.
Great water park that nobody had ever done a water park of that size with an aquarium of that size in a private resort, and a great visionary in the hospitality industry, which was Saul Kessner, which is widely recognized as one of the great visionaries out of South Africa. And again, I'm just part of this team that went from Ventanas al Paraíso to Atlantis, just part of the construction team. But I started to figure out in my head, I said, like, I don't like to be given the blueprints of something. I don't think that's my role. I don't like to bid for a job, for a construction contract.
But
Carlos, I don't want to be the guy. Yes.
No, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt, but before I forget my thought here, my observation is you're not only a great storyteller, but you're also a person who listens to the stories others tell you. So it's what your father, the friends of your father told you. It's listening to the story about the resort in Mexico and the Bahamas, which helps you find your way. And I was wondering, did you recognize that as a key moment in your life at that moment, or are these incidents you recognize in hindsight?
I recognize them in hindsight. I couldn't recognize them at the moment, but there was a moment in my life when everything connected, when everything made sense. And that moment was when I met Saul Kessner. Because the impression that made on me was, wow, this is not, I want to be who? I don't want to be the builder. I don't want to be there. Who's the one who decided that the Atlantic civilization had this golden unicorn in the entry, and then there's this Pellas emerging from the water, throwing water on the four sides of it? Who was the crazy man who came up with this thing? And somebody said, well, meet Saul Kessner, the developer. And at that moment, I said, I want to be a developer. I want to be that man. I want to be the person that imagines a story or a world and is able to inspire others to actually build it, to make it reality, to articulate it in a way that, oh my God, who came up with this thing? Because one thing is to design a building. So an architect designs what you order, what you commission. A builder builds what he is being commissioned to build, what the drawing says. But I discovered then and there that there was this role. It's almost of a movie producer, which is the developer. And I said, oh, I want to be the developer. And that changed my life, because then I pursued this career with intention. So I went from just, like a lot of young people out there, like I was just going along what life throws at you, but at least paying enough attention to at some point said, oh man, this is all makes sense. I want to be that, and I'm going to pursue it.
So, and this may be also the lesson for a lot of people watching this, that it doesn't really matter if in the beginning of your career, at the beginning of your life, you explore a little bit, discover what you want to do. There's going to be a moment where it clicks and everything fits. And then you take off, because, and then it's good.
Yeah, and wait until I'll tell you how the story makes a full 360, and it's even a more strong proof of that, what you just said, because I then definitely pursue this with intention. And one of the first intentions was, okay, I have done, and I have built an experience as a construction manager in a construction company, but that really is not development. Development has a big side of is the business of the real estate environment. So I needed a business education. So I went and did a master's in finance in Florida. And then shortly after that, I got a job with a firm at the same time I was doing my master's in finance, I got a break with a group of real estate developers in Miami, also from Mexico, that hired me because of my background in construction management of hotels, not because I was a developer, but they were developers. So it was the very first time that I intentionally jumped into a development company.
Okay.
And this is advice I will give to young people that are interested in real estate development: is find a job in a real estate company and just go along, even if your role is not necessarily to be the developer. I was the construction director, not the developer. But that started to give me exposure to the other side of the business, to the development side of the business, the financial pro formas, the land acquisition, all the entitlements, the permitting, etc. So I started working there, pursuing my master's in finance to round out my profile. To say, okay, now I'm gonna be validated because Bill, not only a civil engineer but a finance guy. Finished the master's and went to work, got a break, and went to work with Fairmont Hotels, and it was an interesting position because I was still the director of design and construction for Fairmont, but this time I'm definitely in the hospitality industry. Now I'm with a global recognized hospitality brand, and I went to Mexico to start developing hospitality projects, and the last part of that was when the Pellas group out of Central America, with operations in Panama all the way to Guatemala, which was a family conglomerate with investments in banking and energy, headed by a great visionary, Mr. Carlos Pellas, called me to an interview in Panama, and I was offered the opportunity to lead the development of a large mixed-use master plan community, which is today in the center of the city of Panama. It's very successful. It's called Santa Maria, and it's one of the first projects I did. I moved with my family there and start working in this new resort lifestyle destination within the city of Panama. And quickly after that, Carlos Pellas had a vision to put his country in the map, which is Nicaragua. Okay. This is a fifth generation Nicaraguan family, which has its roots in the era where there was no Panama Canal, and his great grandfather, a Genoa immigrant, moved to this Central American country because it had the largest navigable freshwater lake called Lake Nicaragua. And this is a time in the 1849s when there was a gold rush to California, and the safe passage to go from New York to San Francisco was to take these oceanic boats, both from San Francisco to Nicaragua and Nicaragua to New York. It was a business run by the Vanderbilt family of New York, and their partners in Nicaragua was the Pellas family, running these steamboats in the lake. So this is even prior to the Panama Canal. So a family with great roots, and a fascinating businessman like Carlos Pellas, a fifth generation Stanford graduate, had a vision for this country. And the vision was, I want to put it on the map. I want to create a destination out of the country. I want to find a way to put this country that is full of warm people, that has been so generous to his family over the years. I want to do something great. It's a legacy project for him. The challenge is that when he invites me to collaborate with him in those projects, which is large land acquisition in the south of Pacific of Nicaragua and the north of Costa Rica, the challenge is that these places are remote. Nicaragua was really not a destination, was really not a top of mind brand destination. It doesn't have airlift. It didn't have airlift. So there was plenty of connectivity. As I like to say, you don't wake up in the morning, have breakfast with the kids in New York and say, okay, kids, pay attention. This summer, it's going to be Disney or Nicaragua. Choose. No, you don't do that. It's not, it doesn't come up. So I think it was a very high, tall order of a mission, right? It was almost exotic in nature, but I was really challenged by it, and all the sum of all the experiences over the years were culminating in this amazing mission. How do we create a destination where none exists? And in the process, we elevate the lives and the economic whereabouts of the local people that are very marginalized, that have never had economic opportunities. And in the process, we put a country in the map for the right reasons. And in the news, for positive reasons, for the warmth of its people, for the amazing traditions, for the craftsmanship of their artists, and not because of famine or war or hurricane. How do you do that? And how you help this visionary Carlos Pellas achieve this vision, and that's where we started working on the development of what will become Mukul, which became an overt resort, and it's a jewel of a property in the South Pacific of Nicaragua. And in the process, he acquired land in the North Pacific of Costa Rica, which is really part of this beautiful Costa Esmeralda region.
Yeah. And that's where you are right now. Yeah.
That's where I am right now, which is truly the last frontier. And it was going to take a Nicaraguan businessman like him to realize the potential of this region, of this Riviera, that also happens to be, as the World Bank defines the most marginalized communities in Latin America, happens to be, I mean, the communities that are more exposed are more vulnerable in Latin America are either have large land protected, or their coastal communities, or their border communities, where here we had a trifecta. We have the three things, because this part of Costa Rica is also the second largest national park in the country, the largest protected continuous transit of 4 different ecosystems, extremely important to the point that it was declared a UNESCO heritage site, but forgotten from the central government, really far from the central metropolis of San Jose, never really overlooked completely by any developer before. So nobody came up here, and nobody came to Nicaragua either. So 15 years ago, I came to this area and started working in what will define my vocation for the last 15 years, which is creating these places that through luxury hospitality provided tools for true conservation-based destination that impact the community, create jobs, and becomes a hope and I hope a roadmap of a possible alternative in the future for other regions in the world that could benefit from the approach of merging luxury hospitality with conservation.
Now,
and that's what my passion today. This whole story makes a 360. Imagine that I come to this country called Nicaragua at the end of a 2-hour dirt road with no paved roads, into a beautiful cove called Manzanillo, but it's like just pasture with cows in a country that doesn't have airlift. And you say, well, we need to put this place on the map. And the thing that I thought at that moment was, well, there was one project one time that really put my country on the map in terms of luxury, because it appealed. It was a jewel of a property with the power to lift the destination into a new level of high-end traveling rates, and that was Ventanas al Paraíso, right? You remember the story?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in Nicaragua, I had the opportunity 20-something years later to call Hal Tanish, that great developer, mentor of mine, to call the same architects and interior designers that at the time when I was young, they were all leading Ventanas al Paraíso. And now I was the developer 25 years later, but I assembled the same team of talented artists, architects, interior designers, development consultants. And we basically reassembled what was the original Ventanas al Paraíso team in Cabo 20-something years before in Nicaragua. And we created one of the most beautiful and amazing jewels of destinations in Central America, which is Huacalito.
It's absolutely amazing, and it's called Dreams La Mareas. May I assume that did you come up with the name Dreams? Because it reminds me of the storytelling you do. You create dreams for people.
No. Casually enough, in Nicaragua, we partnered with a group of hospitality.
Okay.
That runs the brand Dreams. So there's Dreams resorts in Mexico and everywhere. But so it was really 2 resorts that we created. We created Mukul in Nicaragua and Dreams in Las Mareas in Costa Rica, which is another part of the story, because in the case of Costa Rica, the country has a great brand recognition. The destination within Costa Rica was completely ignored. It was completely undiscovered. So what we wanted was to find the challenges were different. In Costa Rica, the challenges were that we were at the northern border, surrounded by this UNESCO heritage site, a jewel of biodiversity, but there was no potable water. There was no paved roads to get to this location. There were several villages of fishermen and farmers that live out of wells that were very, very poor. So we needed to find a formula of a large scale enough investment that justifies bringing water, paving roads, doing all this effort, but that could be done in a way that marries or balances that scale with still good land planning, good land stewardship, making sure it's sustainable, is not making sure that once it's built, you don't see a gigantic block of rooms by the beach. And we accomplished that as well. As you were here a few weeks ago, and as you remember, this is a resort that does the job of creating jobs, of impacting the community, bringing infrastructure, but it was done in a way that merges with the land, goes away, disappears. And if you walk by the beach of Dreams Resort up here in the north of Costa Rica,
you will not know it's there.
See it.
Yeah, and I
you
can
will not know it's there.
Yeah, from personal experience, I can vouch for that. Although because it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, to what extent do you get critical feedback or questions? Well, because it's a World Heritage Site, the best thing to do is leave it alone and don't develop it.
Yes, no, and that's a question I made myself several times. Yeah. Maybe there's places in the world that should be left alone. But what happened is, and what the other side of the coin, and what a lot of people don't understand until you move to these locations, you work in Nicaragua, you work in Costa Rica, in the north, in the border, is like talking with the same people that are in charge of protecting and creating these large protected areas. If you sit down with them and you ask them, what is the biggest threat to the Área de Conservación de Guanacaste, this UNESCO heritage site that is ever growing, is really creating a continuous transect of ecosystems. What is the biggest threat? Because I think it's a fantastic endeavor. It's a jewel. It should be kept intact. Should be messed with. Well, the biggest threat is hunger and unemployment, desperation. Because, as I said before, what happened is you found that these places are located in regions where they also share territory with populations that are near the borders, are coastal, and with half of their land set aside for conservation, with little investment in anything else, no industry, no economic investment. Over the years, what you develop is people that are hungry, that don't have jobs, they don't have means to send their kids, keep their kids in their towns, they have immigration, etc. So over the years, the biggest threat to this protection or this conservation is the hungry and the desperation of the people around it. It's like if you don't have a job, if you can make a decent living, if you don't have a roof, eventually, well, what is left aside? Well, let's burn the área de conservación to see if you can hunt, cut the trees to sell the timber. So at that moment, I decided, no, this of course is a balance, and this is where the luxury comes into the equation. At least the thesis or the lessons I have learned over the last years of doing this is luxury destinations and luxury hospitality allows you to introduce a model that is elitist because it's of limited capacity, but allows you to introduce a model that says, well, maybe only a few can travel there, but the reason only a few can travel there is because it's okay that only a few impact the region, but those few travel to a location and spend so much, and that they can integrate a large number of local people and integrate their economies, the farmers, the fishermen, into this luxury operation. And hopefully, by keeping it luxury, by keeping it of low volume, high impact, you create the conditions for the rest of the area to remain in conservation and actually create a good living for the people that live around it. So that has been our effort here, and that's have been our aim. Yeah. Pursuing a model that introduces tourism, but hopefully in the highest level of tourism, people that appreciate the privilege of having given an opportunity to be in there in some of the most wonderful locations of the world. And I truly believe that. I truly believe that luxury hospitality today, it may provide us one of the few tools we have to bring economic impact to remote locations, and with the hope also keep them remote and keep them pristine and keep them in good shape.
Hey, Carlos, time is moving so fast listening to you.
Yeah, I know.
There are a couple of questions I still want to ask you before we have to go. First of all, what does success mean for you?
Success to me means that I can see to the eyes of my kids and my family with the satisfaction and and feeling good that what I did with the locations I was given, with this beautiful nature that I was given the opportunity to alter, is even better today than how I found it before. I want to feel that I never be ashamed of telling my kids, look, I was given an opportunity in the north of Costa Rica, in Nicaragua, and other remote locations, and what I've done is even better than what I found. That to me will be the definition of success after a life spent in this career.
And you just mentioned your kids, wife. Because it's so far away, it's remote. May I assume they live near you?
Yeah, they live near me. They live in San Jose, and I have had the privilege of having a wife that is that had also the explorer spark in her. So she's even more explorer oriented than me. So she has gone to all the adventures. She has lived with me in Panama, in Bahamas, in Nicaragua, and Costa Rica. That is very important, because I'm pretty sure that 60 or 70% of the success of this story as you go through it was because she was there with me along the way. Absolutely. She was a great partner.
I think you want to show this video to her as well, just to confirm that, I guess.
Yes, absolutely.
So a last question, Carlos, and I realize I have 10, 20 questions I cannot ask you at this, but one last question. How do you want the world to remember you? What you've done in the north part of Costa Rica? Is that your legacy? Is that something else? What do you feel?
I think I wanna. I mean, legacy is a very ambitious word, and sometimes, I mean, human beings, we have a limited amount of time on this earth, and we should just aim to be good people to the others, to our friends, family, friends, neighbors. So I don't think in my life in terms of legacy. I'm not that ambitious, but I want to feel. I always wanted to feel that what I did was of a higher purpose than just making a living, getting a paycheck, or buying a house. I want to feel after the end of a life that at least in some corner of the world, some community is better off because of what we build in there. I want to feel that the pride and the satisfaction of having given the opportunity to work along great visionaries like Carlos Pellas, and through that work and that partnership with him, we lifted an entire country out of what it was. We put Nicaragua on the map for a different reason than just bad news. Or the north of Costa Rica became a prosperous area that allows for the conservation of such a jewel. if you can just be remembered in these two communities, like someone that was able to do a change, I think that would be a beautiful way to be remembered.
Hey, and what, Carlos, thank you so much. And also what I remember is, again, you've proven the value of good storytelling, because it was fascinating just listening to you. And because
Thank
I
you so
think
much.
your stories today showed, you could say, what Wish can do, because it's an amazing resort. I'm going to revisit you as discussed.
Please,
Hopefully
absolutely.
people will be very curious and will look in their own eyes what you have accomplished in.
I will encourage whoever is listening to think about the north of Costa Rica. It's really off the beaten path, but within an hour of an international airport. But it's the last frontier, and within this frontier, they're gonna find one of the most fascinating, bio-intense ecosystems that is really worth visiting. And as you witnessed last time, quite a surprise. You wouldn't expect it because, again, until very recently, not even in the maps. It was not even in the maps.
It's going to be in a map right now. It's behind me. You can point it out, and it's real.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much. That was fantastic, Frits. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.